Well. Welcome back to my lecture series. We finally move on to Book 6 of the Legendary Scrolls, titled, as you can see, The Fall of Kalvus. Now, Book 6 marks a great, maybe not great, but a general tonal shift in the Legendary Scrolls. Now, the book is written by Kalvus, who is the son of King Ankazar from the previous book, and it was compiled by a future king of Empyria named Pollux. We'll learn more about him later, and even maybe in part 3 of this book 6. So it offers an autobiographical tragedy. As you can, it's kind of a spoiler, but it's purposeful. You can see the title is The Fall of Kalvus, not the rise or the book or the account of, but The Fall of Kalvus. For part 1, well, before we get to that, really quick update with the timeline. Let's see, where are we now? We are after the Book of Netza, obviously. So this was book. Sorry, clearing my throat. This was book 5, and now we are here with book 6. So this entire book will span the course of the year 4579 AC to 4590 AC. So about like 10-11 years of time, marking the reign of King Kalvus. So, and see, we're in the beginning, we're still in the first quarter of the Great War as a whole. Now, the first 5 chapters we will cover for part 1. These chapters are focused on tracing Kalvus's rise from his childhood, his blossoming first love, his coronation, his search for peace, and then it culminates in his first internal cracks of pride and fear, hence the fall of Kalvus. But they're very small cracks. We won't get into that until later, for parts 2 and 3. Now, to clarify something from the previous book, I need to I need to show a picture I found online. It's not mine, as you can see, copyrights here. I can't remember where I found this, but I've had it downloaded on my Google Photos for literally years, because he looks almost exactly like King Ankazar. So, if you want to have a picture in your head, in your mind, of what King Ankazar from the Book of Netza looks like, he looks similar to this. This is his kind of vibe. But instead of this color palette, instead of green, it would be royal blue, because the colors of Empyria as a nation, as a kingdom, are royal blue, gold, and silver. You can see royal blue here. So, and he wouldn't have that red gem there. But this is kind of what King Ankazar looks like, except King Ankazar has a little bit more blonde in his hair, not as dirty blonde or brown as this, and he has a more thick, he has like a full beard that's kind of long, maybe goes down to here. That's what King Ankazar looks like. Now I'm gonna cover my mic to cough. Sorry. So this is a good representation, I would say, of King Ankazar's appearance. Let us begin with chapter 1 of The Fall of Kalvus. Now here's a refresher of the map of Ardon, the Earth. We have the land of the elves here, Evenhara. We have the land of Emek, where mankind was first created, a giant jungle and a deep basin surrounded on all sides by waterfalls. We have the land of Verdal here. We have the island of Sophoa. We have the island of Kalia. We have the northern continent of snowy mountains, Serea. The western continent, Sanoa in the north, Sedima in the south. Sedima is the biggest land on Ardon, as you can see. And then we have the mountains of Granera, which go from from this side, and then down here, all the way to this side of Empyria here, are the mountains of Granera. This here is like a mini land. It's not like a full land like the rest. It's kind of a subregion called Ensu, but it would be classified under the land of Granera. Uh, so so the land of Anorak, you can see the mountains from here to the Ensu River, and everywhere north for the rest of this continent. This is the land of Anorak, and so this river of the Ensu River here, and then following the line along the north and to the north to west of the mountains of Ultira. These are the mountains of Anorak, and this serves right here as the border from Anorak to Ultira and Granera here. um, and this here is the Ice Sea, which we will see in part 2 of Book 6. Now, this is just important to have an image in your mind of the map, especially as in the future battles take place and travels happen. It helps to have this image in your mind accurately of the map of the planet. Here is Ultira, the greatest kingdom in all the earth, and remember, it's a giant flat plain surrounded by mountains in a circular shape, and all from all sides. And the kingdom of Ultira is a giant city in the center with a giant palace with a giant tower in the center. All right. And again, refresher from the previous book, a general, very vague, bare bones, not to scale outline of the structure and format of the city of Ultira. So take a little bit of time to look at that. There you go. Okay. Now we begin Book 6. These are the first words. This is the first sentence of. Sorry, my throat feels not clear. Okay. This is the first sentence that Kalvus writes in his journal of the first chapter of The Fall of Kalvus. From the earliest years of my youth, I remember my father's wise counsel. Kalvus recalls his father, King Ankazar, who had led Ultira in victory against the kingdom of Netza years ago. And he's a prince, so Prince Kalvus's mischief at royal festivals shows his craving for attention. He continues to talk about how, I have it here. During the festivals of the kingdom, when all the rich people would come to dance in the palace ballroom, I would run around the ball to disrupt dancing couples. I desired the attention of those older than me. So as a child, he was high energy and wanted attention of older people. He wanted to impress everyone, especially the really rich people in the fays and the gatherings in the kingdom. But eventually, he meets a girl named Glora at this age, when they're age 12. They're both age 12. He meets a girl named Glora, and she's a poor girl, like a peasant girl. She has golden eyes that stick out to him when he meets her. And the moment when he meets and gets a crush on Glora, very quickly, is the moment that will define the rest of Kalvus's emotional journey, his emotional world, you could say. So after meeting this girl, running into her, who kind of asks him what he's doing, he's running around the city, the bazaar area, and searching for trinkets for his room in the palace, with money his father gave him. You know, Glora, this girl, comes up and approaches him. Then he writes, I turned to face the girl who spoke with me, and I was immediately captivated by her golden eyes. I said to her, if I'm a prince, why should I not be allowed to act how I want? And how can you, a commoner, have the courage to not only approach me, but question me as well? I am surprised. Then she bowed and said, I am sincerely sorry, my prince. Please forgive me. I will do anything as punishment for my offense. And I replied, very well then. I will forgive your irreverence if you allow me to take you to the palace as a guest. Not quite the punishment. After I said this, she was speechless for a moment. Then I said, what's your name? And she said, Glora Bellis, sire. So there we go. We have Kalvus officially meets Glora Bellis at the time. And he kind of immediately is infatuated with her. You know, as kids at this age usually are, prone to easily be infatuated with each other, if you remember middle school at all. So in his youth, it is shown how Kalvus always had this kind of pride in being the son of King Ankasar specifically, and being royalty. And you can kind of see here, if I'm prince, why should I not be allowed to act how I want? How can you, a commoner, have the courage not only to approach me, but question me as well? But he's not really mad about it, he's just surprised. He's not used to that. So here, I tried generating an image as closely as possible to what Glora kind of looks like. She doesn't have like this kind of fancy clothing. She's poor. She has like rugged clothes, kind of. So she wouldn't be having these leather gloves or anything. But like her face and like her prominent features, like her hair color, her eye color. Well, even here, her eyes are not accurate colored. They're supposed to be gold, like more yellow. It's all right though. You get the image. All right. So, right after introducing herself, Kalvus continues. After Glora introduces herself, he continues. You have a good name. Will you come to the palace with me? I asked. Then she looked up at me again and said, I would be happy to, but you are the prince, and I am poor. Then I stood before her face to face, and I bowed to her. The crowd around us gasped, and Glora covered her mouth with her hands. I begged her, would you please come to play with me in the palace garden? You are very pretty. So, he just says very bluntly, they're 12. And Kalvus's bow to Glora and its response from the crowd shows the class society in the kingdom of Empyria. Now after this, Kalvus brings Glora with him to the palace garden, and Hydran, a palace guard, kind of blocks her from entering at first, but then Kalvus forces him to let him bring her in the palace, though she's a peasant. Not just any citizen can waltz into the palace, but Kalvus tries to get Hydran to let them, and because he's like, I'm royalty, I can say who comes into my own house, yada yada. Now in the palace garden, he shows off his shrubbery, the bushes he's been cutting for the month, and his artwork of shrubbery to her. But then he does something very, very sweet for her. Returning to the garden, after having gone to his room to grab something for her, I stood before Glora as she sat on the bench. I held the necklace behind my back, saying, This is a precious gift my mother gave to me a while ago. Then I revealed the necklace to her, and she marveled at the stone it contained, which was a royal orichalcum. She took it, and I helped her put it on her neck. So Glora and I spent the rest of that day together in the garden, and I had a guard escort her out of the palace and to her home at twilight. Now, what is orichalcum, first of all? Well, it's an exceedingly rare mineral and ore that is found in the tops of the highest mountains of Granera and Anarek. The mountains of Granera, which, of course, surround the plains of Empyria from the west, south, and east, and then the mountains of Anarek, which surround the plains of Empyria from the east, north, and west. Here, I tried making some images of what orichalcum kind of looks like. As you can see, it's got kind of this magical vibe to it, I guess you could say. It's not magic or special in its properties per se. It's just mineral, like natural earth, but at the same time it's so rare that when people find it, it's worth much more. It's the most priceless gem and jewel, and it costs the most out of everything else in the earth. Now, Kalvus giving this in his necklace that his mom gave him. Giving this to Glora is an extreme act of love, and specifically in the love language of gift giving, which he clearly has, if that even matters, because of the sentimental value of this necklace that Kalvus had received from his mother, Queen Holly, and because we'll see Kalvus is deeply emotionally attached to his mom, just like his dad. Then later, Kalvus recounts a time. Later, Kalvus recounts a time when his father had hosted a royal feast and party in the palace ballroom and dining hall, where there were kings and queens from the other lands of Ardon gathered together, and it was kind of for also diplomatic purposes and to encourage further resistance to the pull of Infernos toward desires for conquest and war and conflict with other nations without cause, which is the whole cause of the Great War. which, by the way, as you remember from the timeline, will still last for 2,000 years. Now, Kalvus then recounts how he wanted Glora to be there with him at this party that is being hosted by his father in the palace, where there are other kings and queens invited from the other lands. When he asks his father if he can bring her, he says that she can also come, if Kalvus can find her in the city, of course. So, that evening, I brought Glora with me into the palace dining hall, and the people of the royal house had arrived. The rulers who were there were Emperor Xylus of Sedima, Princess Kislia of Sinoa, King Hezon of Serea, and King Geresh and Queen Undea of Granera. Now, I want to say maybe just one of these characters will be important later on in this book, but we won't get into that for now. So here we have the royal rulers of Sedima, who rules from the capital city of the land, which is called Eshvala. Let me go back to the map. To the map. So here are where the rulers are from. We have here, and this is the land of Sedima. The capital of Sedima is Eshvala, and the emperor, he's not called a king, the emperor of Eshvala is Xylus. And then we have, here's the capital of Sinoa, called Phasalia, which was named after Phasel from the Primitus Age, if you recall, the end of the Book of Primitus. Phasalia is the capital of the land of Sinoa, and the princess of Phasalia, it's always a, what do you call it? Not a patriarchy, a matriarchy, yeah. Sinoa, the land is a matriarchy, and so all the royal dynasty of Phasalia is always, a woman is always the crown, and they're not called queens, they're called princesses. Why? I don't know, that's just their culture. But the princess of Sinoa, Kislia, and then we have Serea is mentioned in the list of the rulers. So the capital city of Serea at this time is Hesbon. Originally it was Thores, but then half of the city split off because of a civil war, and King Hezon, the king of Hesbon, the capital of Syria, sought to establish independence from Thores. That'll be mentioned later in part 3. And then, of course, we have the king and queen of Granera, who reigned from the capital city of Granera, Thasher, here. It's really hard to see, usually messy, but Thasher is here, about very close to Ultira, relatively speaking. And King Geresh and Queen Undea are the king and queen of Granera from the capital, Thasher. So, returning. When Glora entered the hall with me, the servants of the rulers all looked down on her in disapproval. So this shows how royalty across all the lands, on Ardon at least, they view peasants kind of, if they view peasants mingling with royalty with disdain, naturally. It's kind of a cultural mindset that they maybe they're subconscious of, they have subconsciously, but they're not consciously aware of, maybe. Of course, Kalvus's father, Ankazar, responds to them sternly. And my father said to them, "Why portray such cruel expressions to this young girl? Is she not a person just like us? What person has control over what family they are born into? Cease to look down on my son's friend this way." Then Emperor Xylus said, "So you have allowed this peasant to attend this night of elegance as one of us?" And he replied, "Indeed I have. So Glora and I enjoyed the night and ate till our stomachs were full. I thanked my father for what he had done that night." So, Kalvus obviously highly respects his father, the King Ankazar. And one of the reasons is shown here, clearly, because his father upholds justice, true justice, and equality. Now, on to Chapter 2. Chapter 2 of the Fall of Kalvus. Alright. Chapter 2 of the Fall of Kalvus was written by Kalvus around the same time as the first chapter, so he wrote it at the same time. But the events in this chapter take place about 7 years later, when he's 19. So up to this point in his youth, up to the events of Chapter 2, Kalvus recounts that he had been in constant training by his father for how to be king in the future. He also mentions that his father, King Ankazar, was 206 years old at this time. So when he was 19 years old during chapter 2, same time his father is 206. Now he says how his father still always gave him close and personal attention, regardless of his kingly duties and his age. But now remember that in this universe, people stop aging physically in their appearance around 30 to 35. So when you read that King Ankazar, or hear that King Ankazar is 206 years old, don't picture how you would an old man in the real world. That's not how it works in this universe. So, also, well, let me read now. Here we go. Also, by this time, the worlds had begun fighting against each other without cause. When I asked my father concerning this, he said unto me, The beast has touched the worlds, and that is why discord arises in their hearts to seek others to destroy. The beast, which he mentioned, is that great evil being called Infernos. I had read the account of Infernos, Book 4, in the palace library, so I knew what he spoke of. This made me constantly anxious of an impending destruction. So, why does Kalvus write that by this time... Why does he write this? By this time, the worlds had begun fighting against each other without cause. As if that hadn't been the case already for a long time at this point. Well, it's because it was by that point, or by this point here, that when Kalvus himself began to actually see more blatant and unmistakable signs that the increase in nation versus nation and world versus world wars were not just natural or normal wars. So it's just becoming more apparent to him. From this point on, in all the scrolls of the legendary scrolls, we will see that Infernos is usually referred to by people in the universe as the beast rather than by his name directly, or its name directly. And this is because most people during the Great War had this superstition or paranoia that saying or even writing the name of Infernos would evoke its presence somehow, that the war might reach them. Like if they say the name Infernos instead of the beast, Infernos might actually come or appear, bring the war to them. We don't want that. They don't want that. Now, while Kalvus was busy practicing how to write during this time in chapter 2, while he's busy practicing how to write and sign peace treaties with his father, King Inkzar noticed how he couldn't focus on his tasks, so he gave him a break from that day's work. Now we read, Because my father had given me a break, I told him what was on my mind, saying, I have not been able to get Glora out of my mind. So I have been thinking about being with her again. It has been many long years since I have seen her or spoken to her, and it is hard for me. I do not wish to live the rest of my life as if I had never met her. It has been 5 years since I have even seen her, yet the memory of her has not left my mind, nor do I think it ever will. My heart burdens me, I miss her sincerely. And my father replied, Very well, I will allow you to search for her. We know that the family of Bellis in the past has lived in the east side of the city. Search there, and perhaps you will find her family. I thanked my father, then departed from the palace. I put on common clothes so as to not grab too much attention on the streets. So, apparently, Kalvus had been ruminating about this girl Glory he met years ago, but it was a passing thing. And, he never mentioned it to his parents because maybe he thought it was a little silly to have this crush. Who knows? But he finally just couldn't get her out of his mind, so he needed to go find out where she is. His curiosity finally took the best of him. So, eventually Kalvus finds Glora's parents while roaming the streets. He meets Enak and Jetha Bellis, her father and mother, and they actually invite Kalvus to dine with them in their home with Glora there. Here, while they dine, we see a glimpse of Glora's heart and her burdens. When we had finished eating, I asked Glora about her dreams for the future. She said, Dreams? Dreams? What do I, a lowly maiden, have to hope for in this world? I will follow the light in my heart until I reach the end and enter into Amnia. So she only has hope for eternity, she doesn't have hope for her physical life. And I replied, Yes, that is a good and perfect dream. But what do you wish to have in this life? He's saying, yeah, that's good. It's good. It's perfect that you have that. That's really all you need. Anyone needs. But you got to have some desire for a life now. Like, there has to be something in this life you want, and it's not wrong if you do. But her father, Anak, said, "We have nothing to give her except that which we already have," which is not much, by the way. Sorry, clear my throat. It's probably really loud. Sorry. "We cannot give her any expectations of a wealthy future." Then I said, "Am I not the prince of this kingdom?" And Glora said, "I am content with what I have, although lately I find myself wanting something new." She looked at me after she said this, and kind of imagined like a cringy little smirk from her. Not really cringy. So, shortly after this moment, a guard from the palace actually comes to the Bellis house to retrieve Kalvus back home by order of the king, his father. But Kalvus refuses because he wants to stay and talk with Glora. He's like, "No, I want to stay here with her." You kind of see in his youth he's kind of rebellious a bit. When Kalvus finally concedes, though, and returns home to the palace, his father, King Ankhazar, reprimands him in love, as Kalvus said he was characteristic of his father in the first chapter. So here we go. "I entered the throne room, and my father said unto me, 'Why did you not heed my voice and obey me? Have I wronged you in some way?' And I said, 'Not so, father, but I desire to spend more time with Glora.' 'Is that so? You would rather have dinner in a peasant's house than in our own palace?' Now, he asks this rhetorically, because obviously King Ankhazar doesn't really care about the difference between a peasant and royalty, as you have seen. I replied, 'Father, have you not taught?'" So he's kind of like testing his son to see why, see that his son is similar to him, and how he views that people are really equal regardless of their wealth or status. I replied, "Father, have you not taught me to always consider the poor as richer than us?" See? "Why then do you speak this way about her?" And he said, "You have spoken rightly." See, kind of testing. And he said, "You have spoken rightly. Go now, you are free for the rest of the day." So we see here how merciful and gracious his father is to him. He should have disciplined him for blatantly disobeying him earlier, but he doesn't. In fact, he even gives him grace. He also lets him be free for the rest of the day. No work. Now, the next morning after that, Kalvus writes a letter and sends it via dove to Glora's home, but he's a little disappointed when the return letter from the Bellis house is written by her mother Jetha instead of Glora herself. Nevertheless, Kalvus stashes the letter away in his desk drawers as a memento, he keeps it forever, cherishes it. But after that, he would write another letter to Glora. He wrote another letter to Glora, asking for permission to take her on a walk through the city around evening. And the letter, this time in response to that letter, was from her father, Anak, and it actually granted him the permission to take Glora on the date. So now Kalvus eventually goes to Glora's home, knocks on their door. He asks for Glora's hand to take her by the hand and walk to the streets. So, she was wearing a dress made with leather, which I could tell was purchased at the tailor shop nearest to their district. Leather is a costly material for those in the lower class. Therefore, I knew she cared about the time we shared together, whether or not she only cared because I am the prince. I bowed before her and took her right hand to kiss it, saying, "May we walk together?" This shows how much Glora truly cares to impress Kalvus, but like Kalvus is concerned about, he always has this hint of insecurity in his life, especially when he's younger. But whether it's like just because he's the prince or because she genuinely wants to be attractive to him is not certain in Kalvus's mind yet. Together, they walk and talk about their memories and random things until they stop to eat at an elegant restaurant. And then here in the elegant restaurant, Kalvus opens up about his anxieties about being the future king of Empyria. And I have I try to generate art of what the scene might look like, but it's not what Glora really looks like. I tried. It's not exactly what Kalvus looks like, but it gets his vibe across. So they're both wearing, to Kalvus, he's wearing clothes that are very below him, but for Glora, she's wearing very expensive clothing. So Kalvus is humbling himself out of love to see Glora, to get to know her better, and Glora is trying her best to look nice for him, even though she's already in a humble, poor state. And this is not what the elegant restaurant looks like. It's the best he could do, I guess. Alright. After I spoke my heart to her at the restaurant, she said unto me, Allow me to fill your burdened heart, and I will give you rest. Don't feel so anxious for tomorrow, because I am with you here today. Let your thoughts be consumed by this moment, for this is a special day. And though the sun is setting, it is still not over. Her words gave me peace for the moment. And I sat by her to rest my head on her shoulder. The lighting of the restaurant was dim. Well, let's see, how's that doing? The lighting of the restaurant was dim, and the lamps by the walls added ambience, as some people say, ambience to the place. So I was at ease, and I could relax. So more pictures I tried doing of this scene. It's alright. Not perfect, of course. AI art is meh. It's not real art. It's never going to be perfect. It's just to illustrate things in a quick way, without me having the talent of drawing. So, Kalvus has burdens and anxieties and fears of stress of the future of being the next king of Empyria. And now at this moment, Kalvus falls more deeply in love with Glora, beyond just a mere childhood crush and infatuation that he had had in the past. Then, chapter 3 begins after this. So this is where chapter 2 ends. He drops her off back at home, and then he goes back to his home in the palace, and he kind of flops on his bed with his arms spread out, and he's like, so excited. You know that feeling, hopefully. I know it too well, unfortunately. So chapter 3 starts off with a complete shift in tone and emotion. Complete, 180. Ready? The dreadful day came, which I had feared all my life. My father laid on his bed in the royal chamber, and I sat by his side. I said to him, Now I must be the king of Empyria, and handle the responsibility on my own. And he could not respond, because he was on the verge of death. So I bowed my head on the bed and began to cry. So his father, King Empyria, at last, his death comes at just the worst timing, given that this was the height of his inner anxiety about the responsibilities of being the future king. So, let's just continue. I missed something. Okay. Well, it's alright. So, I'm going to read from my phone, from the book instead, since I guess I forgot to put the quote in here. So, Kalvus writes, After I had finished crying, the servants of the king gathered around him, and they bowed with their swords, pointing to the floor. Then my father took his last breath, and he died. So the fear of my grief was fulfilled. So this was a fear he had his whole childhood, because he knew people died. Even at a young age, he was aware of that. Then the guards wrapped him in a royal silver cloth, and they carried him out of the chamber. So Kalvus writes here in a very matter-of-fact way, because he wanted to kind of move on from this account without reliving the emotions he felt in this moment, maybe. And here we will also begin to see a pattern of when kings die in Empyria. So Empyria has a tradition of the royal guards and servants of the royal family pointing their swords down to the ground with both their hands and bowing their heads whenever a king or queen dies. And prince too, but there hasn't ever been a prince who died as a prince. The funeral for King Empyria is held in the city temple for all the public to attend, as is tradition, for the death of royalty. And here we go. The funeral was a wretched affair. Everyone was wearing black sackcloth, and the stained glass windows of the temple seemed colorless. He's dead inside. My father was dead, but all of the things he did for our kingdom will never be forgotten. Here Kalvus begins to write more about his emotional state and his mental state at that moment in the funeral. Then he continues, I began to remember all the legends my mother had told me concerning my father's endeavors. The story where he led the Empyrian army in battle against the Netza kingdom, and the entire city of Netza was burned to the ground. Then, when the smoke cleared, he ordered all of his Aeons to clean up the rubble. Then he claimed that land for a kingdom, and we gained a second city after he rebuilt it. My mother Holly would often tell me stories of my father's youth as well, and all the times he would journey to the other lands, and would even cross the sea without saying goodbye. I remember when I was younger, and my father would allow me to sit on his throne, and he would tell me that I would be king one day. Then he would say, "Always remember, my child, though you will be king, you must never let your heart be lifted up. For a proud heart will always fall, and the people will suffer because of your haughtiness." After the funeral was over, Kalvus and his mother they returned to their rooms in the palace to mourn. Queen Holly mourns for days. Kalvus for a couple days. Sorry. My throat is killing me. It's annoying. Okay, continuing. I knelt before my bed and buried my face in the sheets. I wore black clothing and abstained from eating a single crumb of food. The entire kingdom also came grinding to a halt, and there was a week of mourning for the king. No one was joyful that week, and no children played on the streets or plazas, as is usually the case. So, then, after this, Kalvus goes to his mother's chamber after he finishes his mourning. I said to my mother, "Why must I be king? If father had lived on longer, I would not have to take his place. I am not worthy of character to be the king of Empyria. I am no leader, and I still have not fully completed my training. The people will rely on me, and I will be expected to be like my father before me. I don't have the wisdom of my father, and I don't have his strength. I am of poor character, and I live for myself, and not for the people. How then can I be the next king? How will I know how to handle the council? Or how will I know when to send soldiers out, or to send out messengers and spies to other lands that may want to bring us down?" Because it is the Great War. "What if the other lands and the nations of them plan to make war against us?" Empyria is the greatest kingdom in all the earth, so it's like one of the few cities in all the nations and worlds where most kingdoms aren't even considering trying to conquer them. Nevertheless, he says, "What if the other lands and the nations of them, what if they do plan to make war against us? I do not know how to command an army, and I have no loyal subjects or servants. I am the least of all the kings of Empyria before me. Behold, when I imagine myself beside the kings of old, I am nothing." So, needless to say, he's not feeling too well. He's very distraught. Sorry, continuing right from there. "When I finished venting my fears, I sat on a chair beside the bed and became silent. My mother rested her hand on my shoulder, and she said nothing. I could tell she cared for me, yet she said nothing because she knew nothing would lighten my burden. But I remembered the time I spent with Glora, and a slight sense of peace began to permeate my mind again." This entire sequence reveals 3 key important things about Kalvus. 1, his deep insecurities and his own abilities and strength. Like, it's part of the core of his personality, his deep insecurities. 2, his tendency toward intense emotions, more intense than what most people feel, in both positive and negative emotions. He gets overly romantic and overcome with positive feelings with Glora at times, as you will see more of later. And he also experiences the lowest lows of bad emotions. So, and the third most important thing about Kalvus and his shaping as a man throughout this story, and his fall, spoiler, not really, it's in the title. Number 3 is his emotional attachment to the 2 most important women in his life. 1, his mother, Queen Holly, for familial love, and 2, of course, Glora, for romantic love and companionship. So now we move on to Chapter 4. And Chapter 4 is all about Kalvus' coronation, his recounting of his crowning as the new king of Empyria. Now, the Empyrian Council is finally properly introduced now. Here we go, Chapter 4. The Empyrian Council, which is responsible for surveying the commonality of the people, sent out an announcement of the coronation. A great multitude of citizens of the higher class came to the entryway of the palace gates. I walked out upon the balcony that stands above the gates, and the servants of the palace stood before me. Maegar, a man highly esteemed from the Ulterior Council, was assigned to put the crown on my head. The servant behind me brought out a royal chair from the chambers, and he set it behind me. And he sits on the chair. Yep. The reason for the council's formation will be given much later in chapter 13 of the Fall of Kalvus. But moving on. Maegar eventually then puts the crown upon Kalvus' head. And he spoke thus unto the people of Ultira, Maegar. Citizens of this great kingdom, I stand before you today to crown your new king. On this day the son of the departed King Anchazar shall take his place. Honor him sincerely with your citizenry, obeying his statutes. I know he is a good man. And though he is young, King Anchazar taught him well. He will be a good leader and king, and he deserves all reverence. Remember King Anchazar, who led this kingdom through the troubles of warfare with the evil kingdom of Netza. Behold now the son of that great man. Continuing. His voice was strong and went out through the entire crowd. Then he turned to me, holding the crown above my head, and he said, Kalvus Fraser, the moment this crown touches the hairs of your head, you will be king of Ultira till the day you die. Maybe not. Then Maegar lowered the crown upon my head. He turned to the people and said, All hail King Kalvus, and the multitude said, Hail to the king. Then the groups of servants and maids from the palace shot confetti from the edges of the walls of the gates, and the Aeons shot fireworks into the air. So fireworks made of arc-light energy, not gunpowder. There's no gunpowder yet. The confetti rained over the multitude of people, and they began to cheer. They began singing the songs that were sung to my father, and the sound of musical instruments permeated the air. So at this moment, especially with expectation that he can hear from Maegar's speech, Kalvus feels even more conflicted about his responsibilities. So now here is something Kalvus, now King Kalvus of Ultira, immediately does after sitting on the throne for the very first time. He writes, I entered my father's secret library, where he had kept ancient scrolls and documents. I looked through them row by row and read each of their titles, and I came across the scroll of the Book of Netza, which was surrounded by other newer scrolls. I began to read the scroll, and my attention to its story was undivided. And when I read in the scroll that Jesan, the palace scribe, had written it, I decided to speak with him. So I inquired of my servants, saying, Where is Jesan the scribe? I wish to speak with him, if he is still alive. And my servant answered, He has been living in one of the towers near the garden since the time of your birth. Therefore I went to the palace garden to enter one of the towers that was attached to its walls. So he goes, and eventually he finds Jesan, who wrote the Book of Netza, the previous book, Book 5, and he goes to meet him to talk about and open up with him about his fears of being king, and also for some advice and wisdom for direction. He's a new king with all this insecurity. Jesan only reminds him to follow his father's example, very basically. Then he says, after this, Now I had reigned for about 2 weeks, and one of my servants came to me with a message from the city of Neveri, saying, We rulers that were assigned by King Anchazar have found it difficult to govern the stubborn people of Neveri. We ask that you come and aid us in our attempts to regain control over the city. I said to the servant who told me this, I will be on my way. Prepare the rift gate for me. The servant left to prepare the gate. I went through the rift portal to the rift plain Enox. So here now we see that the governors of Neveri, the city that is owned by Ultira, and that lies on the eastern side of the Ephraim River on the rift plain Enox, have the rulers, the governors of Neveri, have been losing some control over the people of the city. Kalvus doesn't really go into much detail concerning why or how this is happening, so he must not have cared too much about those affairs compared to the things he focuses the most on in his recounting of his life up to that point, clearly. And so chapter 5 begins. Now here's a wallpaper of what kind of a landscape Enox is, the whole world of Enox. A rift plane, not a planet, remember. So Enox is basically very simple. It's hills, mountains, never any too tall mountains, simple forests, trees, and plains, and rivers, and that's it. This is the map of the provinces of Enox at this time in history. Actually, excluding these 3 cities, but these 3 provinces are now established. These two provinces are newly established recently, but Ovesh is now an established province called Ovesh, and this is the Euphrates River. If you recall from the last book, I showed this map. And now, what used to be Netza is Neveri. Neveri is here, and across the river is the elven capital, Genshur. So chapter 5 takes place about a month after King Kalvus had been ruling over Neveri. So Kalvus has been here for about a month, and he's been helping them regain control of the city. During that time, he'd been overseeing and guiding the governors of the city, and by proxy guiding the citizens as a whole back into order and away from the potential direction of anarchy they might have been heading in before. Kalvus doesn't really say much about the details, though. So instead, this chapter Kalvus kind of focuses on his personal retreat into the elven capital city of Enox called Genshur here, which you should remember from previous videos, of course. And by this point in history, Genshur has become a much bigger elven metropolis of sorts. Let me show you kind of... So Kalvus has been ruling here for a month, and then after this order brought to the city of Neveri, the governors are like, okay, we're good now, we got this under control. Kalvus decides to take his own personal detour, his retreat to Genshur, to see it and to rest, because he knows how peaceful the elves of Genshur are. So, here's a picture, kind of how Genshur might look. It gives off the vibes and kind of the scale, but not 100%. But you get the vibes. King Kalvus goes to a famous inn in the city, owned by an elf named Raethel, who lets him stay in the nicest room of her inn for free because of the great respect and honor that the elves have for Ultira. Kalvus only stays in the inn for a short time to meditate, though, instead of staying for the night. And this is not what Raethel's inn looks like, but it tried. It's not this simple. It's actually built into a giant tree, and its rooms go up to the top of the trunk and have windows that look out from it. Alright. Okay. King Kalvus, he's in this famous inn, and, okay, so this is supposed to be Kalvus, and then I'll introduce these 3. This is not accurate. I generated a second to correct it, but this is more accurate. It's a mandolin, a lyre, and a harp. But this one is more accurate for Kalvus because he's not an elf. But here it kind of turned Kalvus into an elf, so I don't like it. Alright, so what's happening here? So as he stays in his room in the inn, which, by the way, is much bigger than this, but I didn't bother keep trying to fix it. It was impossible. It's a nice big open room. And as he's staying in the room in the inn for a bit, eventually a group of elves come to visit him in the room. They introduce themselves, and they begin playing soothing music for him to help him relax and meditate. He explains to them how he has been grief-stricken and burdened by his new role as the king. He then takes a brief nap to the sound of their instruments. And then when he wakes up, it's evening time. And, so the elves, when they introduce themselves, it's Hisael here, or Hisael. And then we have Labora playing the mandolin. And then we have Avisra and, Devora, Avisra, and Labora. These are the 3 elves. And they sing to him. Well, she's the only one who should be singing, not them. Alright. So, the elves are led by a man named Hisael. The 3 women, Devora, Labora, and Avisra. Now, while Devora sings to Kalvus in Elvish and plays the mandolin, Hisael, he tries to lift Kalvus' spirits by praising his father. Hisael said to me, "We remember what your father, King Ankazar, did for us, how he defeated Netash and saved our city from the hand of his kingdom." So apparently the kingdom of Netza had some potential negative influence and oppression over Genshur in book 5. Anyway, truly, if it weren't for your father, we would be slaves in the kingdom of Netza today. Their evil king stretched out his hand that he might destroy us, that he might take our land. So this was not spoken of in the book of Netza, but it apparently happened, as we can see. But the king of Volterra, maybe it happened before King Nethash set out to conquer Ardon, or attempt to conquer Volterra, and failed. But the king of Volterra came to save us, and he sent his messengers as a harbinger of this. So referencing Mahar and the messengers in the beginning of Book 5. And also, this referencing Mahar and the messengers, though they were killed. And then here, referencing when King Ankazar himself would join his army with the elven army of Efes from Ahana, of Ivanhara, when they would join together and actually go to the kingdom of Netza to destroy it. You are the son of that marvelous king. Stand tall and raise your head, for you are the king of the greatest kingdom of Ardon. And now Neveri, the sister established by your father, is a sister city to us, and they make trades with us selflessly, or cheaply, you could say. Your own father did all this, so be glad. The whole city, Gensher, the whole city shouted for joy when we saw the city of Netza fall, when its smoke arose and darkened the sky, and when the earth beneath us trembled. And that references the great historical moment at the end of the book of Netza, when the armies of Volterra and the elven army of Efes come together, their Aeons, to destroy the great tower of the castle, and as it falls. So they play music for Kalvus until evening, after he wakes up from his nap. And then Hisiel actually brings Kalvus a tray of elven foods when he wakes up, for Kalvus to enjoy. And Hisiel brought me a metal tray with many extravagant, I can't do that, many extravagant elven foods on it. It had lavish bread wrapped in leaves, gilderberries, elven cakes, and crystal water mead. Lavish leaves are, similar to from Lord of the Rings, lavish bread wrapped in leaves. Very clear. I ate the bread, the gilderberries, the cakes, and drank the mead. They filled my stomach and satisfied my flesh. Indeed, elven foods are very rare, and they are known for their exquisite flavors. And Hisiel said, as I ate, enjoy all the food, for they were bought at high prices. Each item of food was worth about 20 pieces of silver. Woo! That's a lot in this world, even for elves. When I heard this, I was not surprised, for the food was almost perfect in quality and presentation. Now, what are these foods? Of course, I made them up, mostly, except for the lavish bread. So let me show you some pictures I tried generating of them. We know what lavish bread looks like, especially from Lord of the Rings, right? So this is lavish bread, and it's wrapped in leaves. It should be wrapped. These are gilderberries. These are elven cakes, somewhat. These two are the most accurate. This is the hardest to get right, but it's close enough. These are elven cakes, super good. And this is what crystal water mead looks like. It's mead, so it's alcoholic, and it has like a little bit of fizz to it, a little bit of bite. But it also has like this sweet kind of flow to it when you drink it. And it's if you look at it and you imagine what that might taste like, how good that might taste, that's what it tastes like, but 10 times better. All right, so there we have. This is what Kalvus is given when he wakes up from his nap. So he's kind of living the life right now on this day, at least. It's got lavish bread, it's got gilderberries, elven cakes, crystal water mead. It's good. As Kalvus notes, these elven foods are really rare cuisines, and are even among elves, and are also very expensive. So this shows how much the elves, especially the elves of Gensher, value and respect the royal family of Volterra. So certainly Kalvus felt very loved here, comforted. Now, once I finished eating, I said unto Hisiel and his maidens, I must go and return to my kingdom now, lest I linger on here because of the pleasures of the city, and I forget my own people. Sorry. I'm losing my voice already. I just woke up, but it's like 12:45 a.m. p.m., not a.m. I thank you sincerely for your songs and your meal, for it is with great disappointment that I must take my leave. And they bowed before me as I left the room. Rayathel also bowed as I left the entrance of the inn. From there I made my way back to the rift gate outside the city, and I returned to Volterra. So chapter 5 ends with Kalvus forcing himself to leave and return to Volterra, so as to avoid feeding his inner desire to just be lazy and not do his duties as the new king. But this kind of shows his inner self-awareness, And There we have it. That is chapters 1 through 5 of Book 6 of the Legendary Scrolls, The Fall of Kalvus. Part 2, in the next video, will cover chapters 6 through 10. And I will see you then, or hear, well, you'll hear me then. Peace out.